Welcome to the introductory video for the SAT Mathematics section. In this video, we're just exploring general tips. Now it's math, so you got the biggest tip I like to say is you got to know your math, but there are some workarounds, so we'll get to that. Now the first thing we need to look at is structure. So there are non-calculator and calculator questions. The non-calculator section involves 20 questions, out of which 15 are multiple choice, and you have 25 minutes for that, right? Your calculator section, it's 55 minutes for 38 questions, and out of which 30 are multiple choice, right? So that means 8 are fill-in grids for the calculator section, while that's 5 fill-ins for non-calculator, right? In your non-calculator question, if you divide the time, you have about 1 minute 15 seconds per question. I recommend you take 45 seconds for the MCQ questions and 1 minute 30 seconds for fill-in questions. That should leave you about 6 minutes 15 seconds to recheck, which is ample. Now that's just rough approximates. I do not want you to look at the clock for 45 seconds and answer a question and then keep on doing that. But that means for 10 questions, you should be taking about 7.5 minutes. So 7.5 minutes for 10 multiple choice questions in total. So that kind of thing. For your calculator section, you have slightly less than 1 minute 30 seconds per question, and I suggest you take 1 minute per MCQ and 1 minute 45 seconds for fill-in questions. This will leave you about 11 minutes to recheck, which is ample. Check your time remaining after every 10 questions is what I'd suggest. And most advisories will say leave time to recheck, and the math section is the only time where I think you do need to leave time to recheck. But if you think you are the person who does not make silly errors, which is something people tend to do, I tend to do it, then by all means do it in one shot. Do not take your time. But I really think for the mathematics section, please do recheck, right? Because the bracket for 800s, as you see, is in some tests it will require you to actually score 58 out of 58, and that's the case for most of the tests, and so you do not even want to lose one question out from your raw score. Otherwise you might get a 790 instead of an 800, and that's minus 10 from your total score. It could be a difference between a 1490 and a 1500, a 1500 and a 1510. I mean, so it might not sound like much, but it's a 10 you can get, right? So why lose it? It pays to proceed by elimination in certain questions. So that's the first tip. So there are some questions where you can say some answers, or you can see some answers are obviously outrageously wrong. So if you're stuck, eliminate the outrageously wrong questions. This is especially good for questions with those problem statements. So so if you have to ask, if you have to answer whether only 1 or 2 is correct, or 2 and 3 is correct, and 1, 2 and 3 are maybe not an option, so you can remove the option that says only 1 or the option that says only 3 or something like that, right? For statement questions, try to determine which of the 3 statements are true before looking at the options. So before looking at the options, I should say I think 1 and 3 is true, and then I'll look for if 1 and 3 is an answer. Ask questions, understand your mistakes. If there is a question you get wrong when practicing, understand why that is, and ask other questions that might help you understand the concept better. If you don't understand one question, move on and come back later. Wherever possible, try to substitute letters with actual numbers and see if it helps you answer the question. So there are many questions where if you substitute a number and then if you maybe have a variable a, if I substitute maybe 30 in it, it helps me understand and visualize the question better. So wherever there are letters, and if you're not getting anywhere, try and substitute real numbers and see whether it helps you, right? It is okay to use trial and error for MCQs, so try and plug in each of these options into the problem statement and see whether it makes sense. So it is okay to reverse engineer the whole thing, so work from the answers to the question and see if you can get yourself to the question statement rather than just find the answers from the question. Now I do recommend when practicing, at least, that's something you can do, but try and work it from the question to the answer as well, so that will improve your ability to spot the answer when you're actually giving the test, because reverse engineering the thing is not always going to be possible. So just maybe there are some questions where you can't just plug answers, or there might be nothing to plug the answers into, so you cannot use this method. Memorize your formula. You need to memorize each and every one of them, and know that the SAT, know that you should always know more about each topic than the SAT expects you to, because what we're covering in my videos are things that are statistically likely to come in your test, and often they'll most likely not ask anything outside that. But in case they do have one question, it is better to know outside. It is better to know outside what I've covered. And maths is something I believe that the more you know, the clearer the earlier concepts become for you. It is easier to understand the easier concepts if you know something about the harder concepts. That's a personal experience I've come up with in math in general. So and it's really interesting, to be honest, when you start actually understanding math and looking ahead. You'll begin to see links between different branches of maths, and it gets really interesting, to be honest. So always do more than what is required when it comes to math. It helps you do what you need to do better, if that makes sense. And with that, in the first video, we're going to cover arithmetic, which is going to be probably the easiest thing that I'm going to cover in the video. But rest assured, the entirety of the SAT math is pretty easy. I do not think they're testing more than elementary math skills. They're definitely not testing for anything above 8th grade, say 1 or 2 topics. So don't worry, it should be a breeze. It's just these silly mistakes you're watching it out for, and the 1 or 2 or 3 new things you might come across, or more. It does not really matter. If all of them are easy to learn, even if you don't know them. And with that, guys, see you in the next videos. I'm pretty sure it will cover everything you do need to know. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.